2 days before Christmas, I rose before the sun and headed straight to the farmer's market. The air was sharp and cold, but inside me a warmth stirred. I filled a big woven basket with the freshest produce I could find: bright carrots, deep green herbs, buttery potatoes, and a perfect whole chicken. My fingers were half frozen by the time I got home, but my heart was glowing. I got to work right away, humming softly as I peeled, chopped, stirred. The house slowly filled with the rich aroma of roasting garlic and thyme. I was making Chloe's favorites: lemon herb roasted chicken, and creamy mashed potatoes with a little extra butter the way she liked. I set the table with the special cloth we only use during the holidays, fluffed all the couch pillows and dimmed the lights just so. Then, I sat, waiting like a child hoping to catch a glimpse of Santa Claus, my eyes glued to the front door. Chloe had just finished her first full-time job after college. She'd insisted on working straight through to the last official day, saying she wanted to leave a good impression on her boss. That was always her way: hard-working, determined, eager to prove herself. She reminded me of myself when I was younger, before life wore its grooves into me. It was just after 7 when the door finally creaked open. I jumped to my feet, my smile already stretching across my face, arms halfway raised to greet her. But Chloe didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she made a beeline, straight into her father Daniel's arms, practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad, I got a $5,000 bonus this year," she blurted, eyes sparkling. Daniel lit up like one of the lights strung across our porch, his face glowing with pride. "That's my girl," he said, patting her head gently. "I'm so proud of you." Then came Walter and Gloria, my ever-enthusiastic in-laws, bustling in from the kitchen, their faces full of delight. Gloria clasped Chloe's hand. "You are the pride of this family," she gushed, her voice thick with admiration. I stood off to the side, half smiling, watching the scene unfold like an outsider looking in. I really was happy for her. How could I not be? But still, somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet ache settled in. It felt like being forgotten, overlooked. I had raised her, kissed her scrapes, sat up with her during late-night fevers. Yet now, in this moment of celebration, I was invisible. I stepped forward anyway, took her hand and smiled. "Long day? Are you hungry? I made your favorites. I can heat them up for you." She didn't even look at me. "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" she said sharply, clearly irritated. Then, with a burst of energy, she dropped to the floor and unzipped her suitcase. Her face lit up again as she pulled out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes and placed them on the coffee table like she was about to host a game show. Just then, Marcus and Claire arrived. Marcus, Daniel's younger brother, always had a way of making an entry. Their eyes immediately went to the envelopes. "Wow, Chloe," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "Looks like you're doing great at work. Are these gifts for everyone? That's really thoughtful." Chloe grinned and rushed to hug Claire. "Auntie, I missed you so much," she squealed, clinging to her like a long-lost friend. I didn't move. I stood rooted, watching her wrap her arms around Claire, her face full of affection. And it hit me: she could love anyone. She could show warmth and kindness to everyone in the room. Everyone, except me. As everyone settled around her, Chloe cleared her throat like a hostess presenting an award ceremony. "To thank you all for supporting me this year," she said brightly, "I prepared a little something for each of you." She began handing them out one by one. "This one's for Dad, a $1,000 Visa gift card. Grandpa Walter and Grandma Gloria each get a $300 spa voucher. Marcus and Claire, gourmet market cards, $200 each." I stayed still, trying not to let my expression change. A part of me held on to hope. Maybe mine was special. Maybe she saved it for last. I reached out slightly when she reached back into her bag, but then she pulled out our little dog, Mochi, cradling her like a baby. She slid the final envelope into the tiny sweater I'd knit for her. "And this one's for you, Mochi, for being such a good girl this year." My heart stopped. I stood there, my hands still hanging in the air, my smile frozen in place. Silence wrapped around me like a cold fog. Finally, I found the strength to ask, "Chloe, What about Mom? She turned toward me, her voice casual but cutting. Mom, you're home all day. You don't work. You don't know how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean. Yeah, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important. So, why would I get you a gift? Claire shifted uncomfortably, placing a hand on Chloe's arm and whispering something. But Chloe just pulled away. Oh, and guess what? She added cheerfully. I booked flights for everyone to spend New Year's in Bali. We leave tomorrow night. My breath caught. Maybe this was her way of showing she cared. Maybe this would be enough. I moved toward the coffee table, searching among the scattered envelopes for my boarding pass. It wasn't there. I looked up confused. Chloe tilted her chin and spoke like she was giving instruction. Mom, you're not coming. I need you to stay home and watch Mochi. She'd be miserable here alone. And you're perfect for the job. That was it. That was the moment something inside me, something silent and suppressed, finally snapped. The rage bubbled up before I could contain it. My hand flew forward, and the plate of cookies I had baked that morning, the ones I had wrapped in ribbon and arranged like a gift, crashed to the floor. The shattering noise cracked through the room like a fire alarm. Lena, what on earth is wrong with you? Gloria shrieked, leaping up from the couch, her voice sharp as shattered glass. Walter's brow furrowed. You just ruined the entire night. Daniel turned to her, voice laced with disgust. Gloria, this is what I warned you about. Marrying a woman like this. I've been cursed since day one. Chloe blinked, then narrowed her eyes. Oh my God, Mom. Seriously? It's just a trip to Bali. I'll take you next year when I get another bonus. You always have to make things about you. Jason opened his mouth to speak, but Claire quickly reached for his hand and shook her head. Her lips pressed into a line. She saw the train wreck unfolding and wanted no part of it. A bitter laugh escaped from my chest, cold and raw. So this is what it takes for you all to notice me. I have to throw something just to remind you I exist. Daniel's face darkened. His voice dropped, tight and controlled. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you're being right now? This was supposed to be a joyful family gathering. But no, you had to ruin. If you can't handle this, Lena, then go. No one is stopping you. And there it was. The truth finally out. I wasn't family. I was the unpaid maid. The leave-in dog sitter. The background noise that cooked and cleaned and got no thanks in return. Without another word, I untied my apron and yanked it off. I tossed it to the floor like a white flag stained with 20 years of quiet surrender. Then I turned on my heel and stormed into the bedroom, not stopping until the door slammed behind me. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed a bag and shoved in whatever clothes I could find. Jeans, sweaters, socks. I slipped my wallet and ID into the side pocket, then turned to leave. Claire's voice stopped me at the threshold. She rushed in, her eyes wide with worry, her voice pleading, Lena, don't. It's late. Where will you even go? From the hallway, she called out toward the living room. Chloe, talk to your mom. Don't let her walk out like this. But Chloe didn't even bother to stand. She lounged back against the cushions, her eyes half-lidded, her lips curled into disdain. Let her go, she muttered. What's she going to do? Run back to her mommy's house? She throws tantrums all the time. She'll be back tomorrow like always. And just like that I knew with crystal clarity that everything I'd feared, everything I'd tried not to believe was true. My daughter didn't see me, not really, not as a person, not even as a mother. I was nothing to her. A burden, a convenience. 20+ years of love and sacrifice reduced to a punchline. I brushed past Claire without a word and walked straight out the front door. The winter air hit my face, sharp and cleansing. As I reached the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number I still trusted. Mom? I said, my voice calm but hollow. Iris paused. Lena, is everything all right? I'm not coming home for the holidays, I replied. I need some time away. I think I'll take a trip. There was a quiet pause on the other end, and then Iris said gently, that sounds like a good idea, honey. A change of scenery might do you good. Just be safe, okay? After a few seconds, she added, remember I told you I was thinking of selling the old house. Well, it's done. The sale went through. The money's in. I'll send some your way. She didn't ask for details. She never did. She just supported me, fully and quietly the way only she could. I'm okay, I said softly. I don't need anything right now. But thank you. If I do, I'll ask. She agreed with a nod I could almost feel through the line. But 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. A wire transfer. $20,000. The memo line read, "To my dearest daughter, go have the time of your life." I stared at the screen, hands trembling, not with guilt, but with the overwhelming realization that someone finally had my back. That night, I checked into a quiet boutique hotel downtown. I tucked myself into crisp white sheets, closed my eyes, and slept in a bed that truly felt like mine for the first time in decades. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the window like a gentle promise. I wrapped myself in the hotel's robe, sat by the window with a steaming cup of coffee, and watched the city breathe. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was low and stiff. "Amanda, how long are you planning to keep this up? Come home now." "I went by your mom's place. She said you never showed up. I don't care where you are. Just get back here." I said nothing. I simply ended the call. Who did he think I was? Some housemate? An on-call servant he could summon at will? Moments later, the phone buzzed again. This time, a cascade of texts from Chloe. "Mom, seriously? Are you too old to be acting like this? Going missing just to get attention? How immature can you be? We're flying to Bali tonight. If you don't come back, who's going to watch Mochi? If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you." I stared at the screen, lips curled into a bitter smile. This was the child I raised, and she was speaking to me like I was the help. Like I had no life of my own. Tears prickled behind my eyes, but this time, I let them fall, and I swore, right then and there, that it would be the last time. I remembered when Chloe was little, how she'd wrap her tiny arms around my neck and whisper, "Mom, you're the best mommy in the whole wide world." She used to draw pictures of us holding hands under glittery rainbows, promising, "When I grow up, I'm going to buy you the prettiest dress." But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She became colder, distant. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, like slow erosion, the kind you don't notice until one day the coastline's gone. After elementary school, her focus slipped. Her grades began to drop. Daniel said she needed more attention, more structure. He convinced me to quit my job so I could be home more, to be there for her in ways he said I hadn't been. I didn't even argue. I handed in my notice without blinking, believing I was doing the right thing. I became a full-time mother, pouring every ounce of myself into our home, our daughter, our marriage. And for a while, I told myself it was worth it. Even when Chloe would storm through the door shouting, "Stop coming to my parent-teacher meetings. It's embarrassing. Everyone knows you're a housewife. You can't even help me with calculus. What's the point of you sitting at home all day if you're not even smart enough to help me?" I kept waiting for her to understand. Through middle school, high school, college, I believed that one day, when she stepped into the real world, she'd see me differently. She'd realize what I'd done for her, what I'd given up. But instead, this is what I got. 20 years of invisible labor, of being spoken over, passed by, brushed aside. And now, I was staring at a version of my daughter I didn't recognize. A version that didn't seem to recognize me either. That New Year's Eve morning, another string of messages came through. "Nice going. You've officially screwed up everyone's plans. We're flying out at noon. Don't bother coming back. If you're not home by then, don't expect to be my mom anymore." My chest went hollow, but my resolve didn't flinch. Perfect, I thought, pulling up my email. I opened the draft I'd been quietly preparing for months, the one labeled simply "divorce." I hit send. The subject line read, "Finalized papers." The body, "Please sign promptly. If you refuse, I will proceed through court." Then, calmly and without drama, I powered off my phone, picked up my suitcase, and walked into the airport terminal. My destination, Finland, a land of frost and silence, a place where no one knew me, a place where, for the first time in decades, I could breathe, and I did. As soon as Zach received the divorce papers, Panic struck like a slap. He started calling non-stop, each voicemail more frantic than the last, but they all landed in the same place. The number you've dialed is currently unavailable. He paced our living room like a caged animal, confusion and fury rising in his throat. Chloe, on the other hand, remained strangely calm, smug. She patted his shoulder as if she had it all figured out. "Dad, don't worry. This is just Mom's way of trying to guilt us. Classic manipulation. She's a housewife who hasn't left the house in years. You think she's really going through with a divorce? Let her sit in it a while. She'll cave. She always does." Walter and Gloria nodded in agreement from across the room, their expressions firm and satisfied. "She's gotten too used to being pampered," Gloria muttered, her voice tight with judgment. "Divorce? Please. What kind of life does she think she'll have without you?" "She'll be back," Walter added with a scoff. "They always come crawling back." And with that, the family cheerfully wheeled their suitcases into the airport, off to Bali like nothing had happened. That evening, Chloe posted a photo from their hotel restaurant, champagne glasses raised, smiles polished, the glow of a picture-perfect vacation lighting every face. I glanced at it once, then powered off my phone again. Meanwhile, I sat bundled in a thick coat beside a crackling fire pit in Helsinki, surrounded by new friends. Snowflakes danced through the night air as the northern lights shimmered above us in ribbons of green and violet. We clinked our beer bottles and laughed until our sides hurt. There were no expectations, no roles to perform, just peace, just freedom, the kind I hadn't tasted in 20 years. I snapped a few photos of the aurora and posted them with a quiet caption, "Feels like a dream. You only get one life. Be good to yourself." Within minutes, a voice message from Chloe popped up. Her voice was high-pitched, barely holding back anger. "How could you? You're using Dad's money to run off on some wild vacation? I worked my butt off all year and barely saved anything. Do you even care about us? You're so selfish." I didn't listen to the rest. I swiped the message away. She was right about one thing. I was being selfish. And for once in my life, I was finally okay with that. To breathe, to move, to live on my own terms. I only regretted not doing it sooner. So, I posted another photo, my boarding pass for a flight to Sweden. The caption, "Next stop," even brighter. And that was the moment Chloe finally broke. She started calling me non-stop, leaving voicemail after voicemail, flooding my inbox with messages asking where I was, why I had left, when I was coming back. She begged, pleaded, demanded. I didn't respond, not one word. Eventually, I blocked her number. Fuming, she cut her trip short. What was supposed to be a 7-day vacation became 2. She stormed into my mother's house the next evening, tears brimming as she flung herself onto the living room couch. "Grandma," she cried, "Mom's being totally selfish. She ran off overseas while we were trying to celebrate as a family. She cut contact with everyone. She's spending Dad's hard-earned money and now she's even blocked me. You have to talk to her. Talk some sense into her." My mother didn't move. She just looked up slowly, her voice steady as ever. "Let me ask you something," she said. "When your whole family flew off to Bali, did any of you ask if your mother wanted to come?" Chloe froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again, words trapped behind her tongue. Daniel jumped in, voice overly smooth. "Iris, you've got it wrong. Lena said she didn't want to come. She was just trying to save money." My mother gave a slow, biting chuckle. "That's funny. Just now you said she was spending too much. Now she's saving. Which version is it?" Then her voice dropped like a stone in still water. "Let me make this perfectly clear. No one gets to bully my daughter. She has me. And with me behind her, she will never need anyone's pity. She doesn't lack for anything, least of all your crumbs." She stood up, her gaze unwavering. Then without raising her voice, she pointed to the front door. "Get out." Daniel and Chloe shuffled out in stunned silence, their eyes darting anywhere but toward my mother. The weight of her calm fury lingered in the air like smoke, thick and unmistakable. It wasn't until they were back in the car, doors shut and silence stretching between them, that Daniel spoke again. "Wait. I remember now. Your grandma mentioned she was selling the old house." He tapped the steering wheel, voice slow with dawning realization. From the way she talked today, it's probably already sold. And if it is, she must have given that money to your mom. Chloe's face paled. What? Grandma sold the house? She whispered, stunned. That place is worth a fortune. Her eyes darted toward the windshield, as if trying to make sense of it all. No wonder she filed for divorce. She wants to take that money and run. This can't happen. We have to get that money back. From that day on, her tone shifted. Gone was the dismissive, impatient daughter. In her place came a different Chloe, soft-voiced, carefully polite, asking how I was, what the weather was like, if I was having a nice time. As if a few sweet words could erase everything that had come before. She messaged me every day. Hi mom, just checking in. Hope you're enjoying sweet. Have you seen the fjords? They're supposed to be beautiful this time of year. Did you find a cozy cafe? You used to love finding little hidden ones. When are you coming home? I didn't reply. I watched it all unfold like a familiar play. Each line rehearsed. Chloe believed I'd melt the moment she acted soft because I always had before. But not this time. Days passed. I remained silent. Then one night, a voice message came through. Her voice trembled, thick with tears. Mom, I messed up. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean any of it. I was just angry. I didn't think you'd really leave. Please come back. I swear I'll be different. I'll change. Just come home, okay? I listened to the whole thing. And then I laughed softly. Not with joy, but with understanding. She still didn't get it. I hadn't walked out over a plane ticket. I left because I finally saw the truth, what I meant to that family, where I stood. And I wasn't going to stand there anymore. I deleted the message and kept going. A month later, I returned. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Familiar. Still. Daniel looked up from the kitchen like a drowning man, spotting dry land. He fumbled with his phone and called Chloe instantly. She's back. Get over here now. I told you she wouldn't go through with it. If she'd actually signed those papers, we'd be out 300 grand. Chloe arrived in under 15 minutes. The moment she saw me, she smiled wide and rushed toward me, arms outstretched. Mom, you're finally back. I missed you so much. I raised one hand and stopped her mid-step. Then, with the calm of a woman who had already made peace with her decision, I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers. I laid them flat on the table between us. Go ahead and sign these, I said, voice even. Keep the house, keep the car, keep the daughter. I want none of it. Daniel's expression crumbled. His confident grin dissolved in disbelief. His face turned the color of ash. Lena, he stammered, how could you do this? You know how hard I've worked all these years. You sat at home, enjoying life for 2 decades, and now you just walk away, all because you felt a little left out. That's worth throwing away a marriage. I stood tall, staring directly into his eyes. Do you think being a housewife is easy? You think Bluey turned out this way by accident? My voice didn't rise, but the fire behind it flared with decades of silence finally breaking. You made me quit my job. You said she needed more attention, and I gave her everything I had. Everything. I took a step closer, is falling sharp and sure. It was you who spent years belittling me in front of her, telling her I was worthless because I didn't bring home a paycheck. Your parents sneered at me like I was some freeloader, and you never once stood up for me. Chloe tried to interrupt, but I didn't. She disrespects me because all her life she's only ever heard you do it first. Daniel's face twisted with bitterness. Let's be honest. None of this would be happening if your mom hadn't come into money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You wouldn't dare pull this if she wasn't bankrolling your rebellion. Chloe, who had been pretending to look contrite, suddenly snapped. Her voice rose, brittle and shrill. You're being ridiculous. Don't think just because you've got some money now you can treat us like garbage. You haven't taken a second to think about your behavior. I turned to her, cold and clear. Chloe, I hope someday you learn to think for yourself instead of parroting everything your father says. I raised you with everything I had. I didn't raise you to treat your mother like she's beneath you. She opened her mouth, but the words never came. I'm done, I said softly. I looked at them both. If you won't sign, I'll take this to court. I'm ready either way. And with that, I opened the door and walked out. I didn't look back. Not once, because in that moment, I knew this was no longer the woman who spent her nights sobbing quietly over a sink full of dishes. This was a woman who had taken her life back. This was me, free. The next morning, the doorbell rang at my mother's house. She told me later it was Daniel and Chloe again. Same faces, same fake smiles, just a new backdrop and a slightly altered performance. The moment she opened the door, they greeted her with overly sweet voices and eyes that kept drifting toward the old wooden filing cabinet near the wall. They didn't ask to come in. She didn't invite them. She watched their glances dart repeatedly toward that cabinet, the one that held decades of household records, bank files, and property documents, the one they hoped contained a clue about the money. They weren't there to check in, they were there to check the math. And my mother saw right through it. I remember the first time Lena brought Daniel home, she told me later as we sat in her garden sipping herbal tea. They were newly engaged, starry-eyed. She kept calling him responsible, grounded, family-oriented. But I saw something different. She told me how they sat on the balcony while she brought out a cake she had baked fresh that morning. I had been glowing, beaming. He was polite, but not warm. Polished, but distant. He talked about his goals, his long work hours, how Lena understood him, but he never once said what he'd do for her, never said what he'd give, just what she got about him. That's when I knew. He liked her, maybe, but he didn't respect her. And he definitely didn't respect her family. And that, she said, was all she needed to see. Still, she hadn't interfered. She never told me not to marry him. That wasn't her way. Instead, she decided her role would be to make sure I always had a way back, a soft place to land, if the road I chose turned hard. She had done exactly that. She had watched me become smaller over the years, quieter, more careful with my words. She saw how I smiled through disappointment, laughed off insults, and apologized for everyone else's behavior. She saw the nights I stayed up, folding laundry alone, how Daniel would toss the clean clothes on the floor, looking for a pair of socks. She saw Chloe mimic him, day by day. Once, she had heard Chloe scream, "Why should I listen to you? Dad says you're just the maid." She saw me freeze, not react, just swallow it whole. And that, she said, was what truly broke her heart. Not the child's words, but how I had been conditioned to accept them. How I'd learned to carry the weight of other people's disrespect and call it love. So when I called her from that cold street corner saying I wasn't coming home for Christmas, that I was taking a trip, she didn't ask where or why. She simply said, "That sounds like a good idea. A trip might be just what you need." And then she got to work. She pulled out the black leather ledger she kept hidden under her bed, the one that held the money from selling her house. She had saved it for years, telling herself it was for emergencies, for retirement. But she realized in that moment it wasn't for her. It was for me. Not to survive, to leave. The next morning, she went to the bank. When the teller asked if she wanted to include a note with the transfer, she said without hesitation, "Yes. Right. For my daughter's own life. Non-refundable." 3 days after I boarded the flight to Finland, Chloe and Daniel showed up again at her door. The rain had just stopped. The air smelled like wet soil. They smiled too wide, each holding a peace offering. "Grandma, we just wanted to check in on you," Chloe chirped, presenting a box of beautifully packaged cinnamon rolls. "Your favorite." My mother didn't take them. She simply stepped aside and let them in. Not because she'd softened, but because she wanted to hear the game play out fully. They sat down, exchanged pleasantries. But after just a few sips of water, Daniel launched into it. "Bess, we heard Lena's doing well. Off traveling, huh?" Chloe added quickly. She posted that Aurora photo. "Stunning. Even my friends were jealous." My mother nodded without comment. She poured more water, silent. Then Daniel finally said what they'd come for. "We heard you sold your house recently, and, well, Lena received the funds. We just thought maybe she's under a lot of pressure managing that kind of money alone. So we wondered if..." "If what?" My mother interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "If maybe," Chloe leaned in, We could help manage it. We're younger. We understand investments. We could really help her stretch it. My mother smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that comes before the storm. You both know I gave her that money, right? She said slowly. They glanced at each other, uncertain for the first time. You think I'm some daft old woman who just hands out cash to whoever asks? You think I didn't know what I was doing? She set her cup down gently, the porcelain clinking against the table. My daughter earned that money the hard way, by surviving you. Her voice didn't rise, but each word hit like a gavel. Neither of you will touch a single cent. Daniel tried to recover. Bess, this is just a misunderstanding. No, there's no misunderstanding, she snapped. I heard the way you treated her, the way you used her, ignored her, spent her money and still had the nerve to scold her like a child. Her eyes turned to Chloe. I heard you too. Saying she was nothing. Telling her she didn't deserve respect. Chloe jumped up, slamming her hand on the table. You're trying to sabotage our family. My mom never said anything bad about you. My mother let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Of course she didn't. She protected you. But I won't. Then she stood. I only protect her now. She walked to the door and opened it. I've said what I needed to say. You won't touch that money. And if either of you show up again, I will call the police. Don't mistake age for weakness. I know exactly what I'm capable of. Daniel stood frozen. Chloe's glare could have set the house ablaze. But they left, and she closed the door behind them. Not with a bang, but with a soft, sure click that echoed like thunder. A few days later, my mother slipped quietly into the courtroom. She sat in the back row, tucked behind a marble column, hidden from view. She didn't need to be seen. She just wanted to witness the moment I stood fully on my own. I was at the plaintiff's table in a suit that fit like armor, neither flashy nor loud, but sharp at the edges, strong in its silence. I didn't glance around. I didn't need her to hold my hand. I already felt her strength behind me like a lighthouse in a storm. Daniel's lawyer tried his best to twist the facts, to make me falter, to trap me in technicalities, but I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. For the first time in my life, I answered each question clearly, without shrinking, without second-guessing. My voice was steady. My answers were direct. I wasn't the woman who used to swallow pain just to keep the peace. I had been forged in years of quiet hurt, and now I stood sharp and sure, honed like steel. When the ruling came down, I didn't even exhale. The judge's voice was calm, firm. It is evident that these funds were a post-separation personal gift from Ms. Lena Mitchell's mother. Mr. Daniel Mitchell has no legal claim to them. There it was, simple, unshakable. I stepped out of the courthouse, the wind brisk against my face. My lawyer, Tessa, my old college friend, handed me a coffee and smiled. You know what scares him most? She said. I took a sip, letting the heat settle into my chest. Enlighten me. He's not afraid of being broke. He's afraid you're not. He's afraid you can finally spend money without asking for permission. I let out a quiet laugh. No, I said. What really scares him is that I left and I'm doing better without him. I glanced down at the court papers in my hand. Across the top, divorce petition officially filed. 5 plain words. More comforting than any vow he'd ever made. That day, I didn't go back to my mother's. I didn't even go home. Instead, I walked to Evergreen Library, the place I used to dream about working. Back when Chloe was in preschool and Daniel said it was pointless. What's that gonna pay you? He had scoffed. You're better off staying home. Just take care of her. So I let it go. Another quiet sacrifice on the altar of their convenience. But now I belong to no one. And I figured it's time I try the life I once imagined. I filled out the volunteer application at the front desk, my fingers trembling with something between fear and hope. The librarian smiled kindly and handed me a pen. We've been needing someone like you, she said. 3 days later, I sat behind the front desk, by the window, sunlight pouring through the glass, warming my arms. My first visitor was an elderly woman trying to print her Social Security application. I walked her through it, helped her with her medication interactions list, and flagged a few scam calls she'd received. As she packed up, she looked at me and said with a crooked smile, "You're more patient than my own daughter." I smiled but didn't say anything. I'd heard those words before, but now, for the first time, they mattered. Because now they weren't an echo in a void. Now I was earning them on my own terms. Later that evening, I stopped by the bench on Maple Avenue, near the little park I used to pass every day while pushing a stroller. I sat with my lunch in a takeout container and watched the kids race through the grass, their laughter like music on the breeze. An older woman passed with a walker. She looked at me, then at my meal. "Eating alone?" she asked. I nodded. "Me too," she said. "Divorced at 60, lived alone 20 years. The meals just kept getting better." I laughed genuinely and looked her in the eye. "Weren't you scared back then?" She grinned. It was a grin etched with history. "Of course I was, but being scared is still better than living with a man who sees you as the help." We didn't exchange names. We didn't have to. We sat there for a while, two iron scraps slowly warming under the same sun. That night, I got an email from Daniel. "Chloe's falling apart," he wrote. "She says your divorce is ruining her emotionally." I didn't respond. I didn't even open the attachments. I already knew what he was trying to do: guilt me back into submission, pull me by the strings of motherhood like I was still marionette enough to fall for it. But I had learned something vital. Not every child deserves forgiveness, and not every mother is obligated to hand it over just because the world expects her to. The day Daniel vanished from social media, I knew he had finally accepted defeat. His profile, once filled with family portraits and corporate photo shoots, went dark. The curated image collapsed, and with it, the polite nods at church stopped. The invitations dried up. People who once smiled turned their backs, and then his body began to unravel too. The back pain he ignored for years turned into something more serious. His appetite dipped. His stress climbed. There was no one around to remind him to stretch, take his meds, drink his water. Eventually, he was quietly removed from the board of his company. "Personal credit concerns," they said. All those years of mixing business with family, using me as guarantor, siphoning money through joint accounts, finally came back to haunt him. He reached out to Chloe, hoping she could fix things. But Chloe had problems of her own. After losing her job, she started a women's empowerment coaching service, preaching about confidence, independence, worth. The irony was too thick to ignore. She never figured it out for herself. Her ex got engaged the week after she quit. She spiraled, posting a tearful video online. But it wasn't about heartbreak. It was about me. "How could my mother abandon me like that?" She wept into the camera. "She just ran away and cut contact. She ruined our family." The internet wasn't kind. Some comments read, "Your mom didn't abandon you. She finally chose herself. She didn't run away. She came home to herself." One photo of me, taken in Finland beneath the northern lights, had gone semi-viral. Someone had reposted it with the caption, "This woman didn't disappear. She reappeared." Someone liked that comment. It was me. I didn't take her calls. I didn't open Daniel's new emails. They no longer deserved my time. The only thing tying them to me now was a joint legal invoice I forwarded to Tessa. She handled it. Instead, I turned that story into something real, something that breathed. I submitted it as an episode to a podcast that focused on women's reinvention after retirement. I called it "The Cost of Staying Quiet." They aired it 2 weeks later. The host ended my segment with these words: "This story comes from Lena Mitchell, who wants you to remember, a woman is not meant to fade into the background of her family or society. She is meant to shine." The episode received more plays than I expected. Dozens of comments poured in, but 30-something of them stood out. I made my daughter listen. She didn't say a word. I cried, but not out of sadness. I want to try too. She didn't vanish. She finally came back to herself. Those words, they reached into me like soft hands on a bruised heart. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. That spring, I joined a local hiking group. Nothing serious, just people in sneakers with water bottles, strolling through the wooded trails on the west end of town. We laughed more than we walked, took breaks every 10 minutes, and shared snacks like children at recess. Halfway through one hike, a woman took my arm. "Are you Lena?" she asked, her voice hesitant but warm. "I heard your story." I blinked. You really did it," she said, squeezing my hand. "You did what the rest of us were too scared to do." I didn't respond right away. I just held her hand a moment longer and smiled, because in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't the woman who had stormed out of her kitchen in tears. I wasn't even the woman who had sat quietly for years, begging in silence to be seen. I was the woman who walked out, stood tall, and now had just enough strength left to help someone else take the first step. And far away, in a house where I once poured 20 years of my life, things began to unravel. Daniel and Chloe showed up at my mother's door again. It was bitterly cold, the wind bit at their cheeks. They stood on the front step, faces tight, fingers clenched around each other, not out of unity but out of mutual desperation. They didn't ask to come in. She didn't invite them. She noticed how their eyes kept flicking, not to her, not even around the room, but toward the filing cabinet in the corner. The same one as before. They weren't here for peace, they were here to audit. She told me later, they wanted to check the ledger, not the I remember when Lena got married, she said. I gave her the dress and jewelry myself. She cried like a little girl, clutching my hand, saying, "Mom, I'm going to have a good life." She paused. I cried too, but not because she was leaving. I cried because I already heard it. Something whispering inside me, telling me she was going to suffer. After I gave birth to Chloe, my mother offered to help. She brought food, folded laundry, bathed the baby when I couldn't even keep my eyes open. Daniel was always polite, but always with an edge. Once when Chloe had a cough, she suggested, try a warm compress at night. Might soothe her. Daniel didn't look up. That's an old issue. She always gets over it. No need to fuss. Another time I mentioned I was thinking about part-time work. Daniel replied, "Your body isn't what it used to be. Wouldn't it be better to just rest at home?" That night over dinner, he laughed and said, "Isn't it kind of natural for Bess to help with the baby? It's not like she's working." And my mother heard it all. She saw me flinch, saw me tuck myself smaller and smaller. Once, Chloe ran into the kitchen crying for candy. My mother said gently, "After dinner, sweetheart." Chloe screamed, "Why should I listen to you? Dad says you're just the maid." And I, her daughter, pulled her aside and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll talk to her." She didn't mean it. That was the moment, my mother said, when something broke inside her. Not because Chloe had said it, but because I had believed it. Because I had learned to apologize for other people's cruelty, and to do it with a soft voice and a bowed head. My mother had lived that same life before me. She'd buried her voice for years, but she wasn't going to watch me bury mine. So she waited, not to interfere, but to intervene, when I was finally ready. And now, here they were again, Daniel and Chloe sitting in her living room, pretending to care, pretending to reconnect. My mother poured each of them a glass of water, and waited. Daniel tried first. "Bess, we heard Lena's doing well. She's been traveling. We were just concerned." Chloe leaned in. "Yeah. She posted that picture under the lights in Sweden. I mean, wow. Even my friends said it was stunning." My mother nodded slowly. "She's doing fine. Really fine." They exchanged glances. Then came the real motive. "Bess," Daniel said, his voice buttered with concern, "we also heard you sold your house. And well, Lena got the money. We just thought maybe managing it alone is a lot. And if she's feeling pressure, we'd be happy to help guide her decisions." My mother set her cup down and looked at him squarely. "Who told you that?" Daniel chuckled nervously. "Oh, nothing serious. Just something we heard," Chloe added quickly. "We just thought maybe, with our help she could stretch it farther." My mother's face didn't change, but her voice did. It dropped a note lower, firmer. "You both think I gave her money by accident." They froze. "You think I didn't know exactly what I was doing?" Her next words fell like stones. "She earned that money by surviving you." Then she smiled, but not kindly. "Neither of you will ever touch a single cent." Daniel's smile faltered. His mouth opened, ready to recover, to spin the moment into something softer. But my mother was faster. There's no misunderstanding here, she said, her voice cool and cutting. I've watched the way you both treated Lena for years. You used her, dismissed her, acted like she was furniture, something useful but never important. And now that she's free and finally has the means to choose herself, you show up with cinnamon rolls and fake concern. She turned to Chloe. I heard the way you spoke to her, that she was worthless, that she didn't matter, and she still never said a bad word about you. But I will. Chloe's nostrils flared. Her chair scraped against the floor as she jumped to her feet. You're trying to sabotage our marriage. My mom never said anything bad about you. Never. My mother gave a dry laugh. Of course she didn't. She still loved you, still protected you. But I won't play quiet anymore. Then she stood, slow and deliberate. I only protect her now. She walked to the front door, pulled it open, and said in a voice that didn't need to be loud to feel final, you will not touch that money. And if either of you show up here again, I'll call the police. Don't confuse age with weakness. I know exactly what I'm capable of. Chloe froze, her mouth hanging open, fury flickering behind her eyes like a dying match. Daniel grabbed his coat in silence, his face tight and pale. They left. The door didn't slam, but it closed with such quiet assurance that it may as well have been thunder. My mother stood in the foyer for a long moment, hands resting on the table where she'd just set her teacup. Then she exhaled, slow and long, like she'd been holding that breath for decades. I used to worry Lena would get dragged back in, she told me later. She's always been so gentle, always the one to compromise, to give up her peace so others could feel whole. But she saw it in my eyes that day in the study, how I no longer bent, how I didn't flinch when things got uncomfortable. I had become someone else, someone who had learned to live without apology. A few weeks later, my mother quietly slipped into another court hearing. She didn't announce she was coming. She didn't bring flowers or sit up front. She just wanted to see with her own eyes what her daughter had become. She watched me stand there in that courthouse dressed in clean lines and dignity. She watched me answer every question from the judge, every trick from Daniel's lawyer, without trembling. Not the woman who once stood invisible in the kitchen, but someone new, someone sharp. And when I turned to leave that courtroom, the light falling through the windows caught on the edges of the papers in my hand. My silhouette didn't waver, and my mother knew. I had cut myself free. She sat outside afterward, alone on a metal bench, letting the cold wind whip across her cheeks. I wasn't waiting for her to win the case, she told me later. I was waiting for her to win on her own, without shrinking, without apologizing. That night I sent her a voice message. The wind could be heard in the background as I spoke softly. Mom, don't worry about me. I'm really okay now. She listened to it over and over. Not because she doubted me, but because she knew what it meant. I didn't need saving anymore. The next morning, she walked into the town's senior center, a place she'd passed 100 times but never dared enter. She used to tell herself she had to stay home, just in case I needed her. But now, she understood. I didn't need a mother waiting in the wings. I needed her to start her life too. She signed up for a pottery class and joined a community memoir reading group. On the first day, the teacher asked each participant to write one line that defined them. She wrote, "The proudest decision of my life wasn't giving her life, it was standing behind her." After class, an older woman touched her arm gently and said, "That line, who was it for?" "My daughter," she answered. The woman nodded. "She must be remarkable." My mother smiled, her eyes glinting like softened steel. "She is. She really is." That night, she slept peacefully. No waking up in the middle of the night. No dreams of choking down silence at dinners she wasn't allowed to have opinions at. She knew I didn't need her to step in anymore. And finally, she was learning to step out. She wasn't my escape route anymore. She was the force that had pushed me forward. I sent her a message a few mornings later. "Sweetheart, I'm doing well too. No need to look back. Keep walking your path. I'll always be just behind." I read it on a quiet morning while sipping my coffee in a sunlit corner of my apartment. I was listening to music I liked, with no one complaining. It was too soft, too slow, too anything. I wrote back, I will, I promise, and I meant it. The weeks passed quietly, but the storm hadn't settled for everyone. Daniel and Chloe were unraveling in their own separate ways, and neither of them had the grace to do it in silence. It started with the final move Daniel made, the one he probably thought was clever, maybe even righteous. I was sipping my morning coffee when Tessa called. Lena, she said, her voice even, but carrying that slight edge it always did when she had bad news wrapped in a legal tone. Daniel's filed a petition. He's trying to claim part of your trust fund. I didn't react right away, just lowered the mug to the table and said, of course he did. He's arguing that the money your mother gave you was transferred during the marriage, she continued. So technically, he claims, it should be considered marital property. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. Of course he'd go there. Of course he'd stoop that low. But here's what he didn't know. My mother had transferred the funds after I left him, after I had officially separated, after I had shut the door and said not with words but with action, you have no claim over me anymore. It wasn't a wedding gift. It wasn't a mutual asset or a joint investment. It was lifeline money, rescue money, given in the moment she saw me falling and said, no more. I've got you now. We had the date of transfer. We had the documentation. The account was newly created under my name alone. We even had the message my mother had sent the morning she wired the money. Don't give him a single cent. This is the first time in your life you get to spend money on yourself. It was clear. It was legal. It was mine. But Daniel wasn't just chasing money. He was chasing control. This was his last grasp at the illusion that he could still shape my life with a raised eyebrow and a signed check. So we pushed back. Hard. Tessa filed the full response, supported with every piece of evidence we had. Account histories, transaction memos, even Daniel's own shady financial behavior, loans he hadn't disclosed, bank transfers without my knowledge, subtle siphoning over the years. He thought I hadn't noticed, but I had noticed. I'd just been too tired to fight it back then. Now I was rested and ready. At the hair, Daniel wore the same gray suit he'd worn at our wedding. He used to look proud in it. Today, he just looked old. He tried to look reasonable, spoke with that performative calm that always used to fool people. I just want clarity on the assets, he said. We both have a responsibility to our daughter. Tessa rose, sharp as ever, her file snapping open like a knife unsheathed. Your Honor, she said. First, these funds were a personal gift from Miss Mitchell's mother specifically designated for her use. Second, the transfer occurred after legal separation. Mr. Mitchell had no involvement or access. Third, Mr. Mitchell has previously engaged in questionable financial behavior, including unauthorized withdrawals and concealed loans, which we have documented here. She slid the evidence forward. Photos, text messages, the signed loan documents he once told me to just sign real quick. Back when he assumed I didn't read the fine print, he exhaled sharply. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me. He thought he was walking into court with the old Lena, the woman who apologized when bumped into again, the one who smiled through humiliation and kept books. She never got time to read. But I wasn't her anymore. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, flipped through the packet. She paused on the text from my mother, her brow rising just slightly at the line, "Don't give him a single cent." Then she looked up, her voice clear and final. It is evident these funds were a post-separation personal gift to Miss Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell has no legal claim to them. There it was. Spoken with grace. Received like thunder. Tessa didn't gloat. She just closed her file with quiet satisfaction and handed me a new copy of the signed ruling. Outside the courthouse, we stood on the wide stone steps in the morning sun. Daniel stood off to the side, his attorney whispering to him furiously. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Tessa handed me a second coffee, her signature smile just peeking through. "He's not afraid of losing," she said. "He's afraid that you didn't." I took a sip and smiled. "No," I said. "He's afraid that I left and I'm doing just fine." After the ruling, I walked not to the parking lot, not to the nearest cafe, but to the place I had quietly dreamed about for years, the local library, not to visit, to apply. Back then, Daniel had laughed when I mentioned it. "What's that going to?" he said, spooning sugar into his coffee without once looking at me. He always laughed at my dreams like they were hobbies I'd outgrow, but I hadn't. And now, I finally had the space to chase them without someone else's budget dictating my joy. 3 days later, I started as a volunteer at Evergreen Library. It was a quiet Tuesday. My first visitor was an older man who needed help printing a housing application. His hands shook as he tried to use the mouse. I sat beside him, patiently guiding him click by click. By the end, he looked up and smiled, eyes shining. "You've got a gift, you know," he said, "helping people without making them feel stupid." I nodded, smiled, and said nothing, because some praise doesn't need to be answered. It just needs to be accepted. That night, I passed by the park again, sat on the same bench, ate another meal alone, but didn't feel lonely. I watched the sun dip low and whispered to myself, this is what freedom tastes like: simple, soft, and earned. A week after the financial ruling, the silence from Chloe broke. She reached out again, not with accusations this time, with charm. "Mom, you're amazing," her voice said brightly in a message. "Going to Finland and Sweden all by yourself. Was it beautiful? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe next time, we could travel together, somewhere even farther." I didn't respond. The next day, she tried again, her voice thinner now, tighter. "Mom, things haven't been great lately. There were layoffs at work. I was thinking maybe I could come home for a while, just until I get back on my feet." Still, I said nothing. She was playing the part of the good daughter now, the sweet one. But I'd seen the script. I'd lived through every act before. So I waited. 2 days later, she sent a screenshot of her credit card balance. "My card's maxed out. Really wish I hadn't spent so much before. I miss you, Mom." I stared at the screen, a bitter smile forming. Miss me or miss my money? Her apologies, her sudden tenderness. They weren't for me. They were for the account balance she could no longer reach. So I stayed quiet. But this time, I installed call recording and mirrored my phone activity to a secure folder, because I knew what came next. When the charm wore off, when the guilt stopped working, the manipulation would begin. It always did. On the 5th day, she called. I picked up. Her voice was already quivering. "Mom, I really can't do this anymore. I fell down the stairs outside my building today. No one helped me. I was just lying there thinking, all I wanted was to call you." I didn't speak. Silence hung. Then her voice shifted, just slightly, tighter, sharper. "Did you change your bank password recently? I tried to check your utility bill and couldn't log in." There it was, the mask slipping. I leaned back, let the recording app capture every word, and said calmly, "I've upgraded my account security. The bank recommended it. Identity theft is on the rise." There was a pause, then her voice snapped. "Mom, I'm not some stranger. I'm your daughter. Are you seriously protecting your bank account from me?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. My voice never cracked. "If you really want to help, send me that paperwork I asked for last month. But don't try to log into my accounts again." Another pause, then a bitter, disbelieving laugh. "So I really am an outsider now, huh?" "No," I replied. "You made yourself one the day you started treating me like an ATM." There was a thud. Her phone, probably slammed against a table. Then a new tone, loud and raw. "You think you're so above it all, don't you? That trust fund isn't just yours. You lived off Dad's money your whole life, and now you want to keep everything for yourself just because you got a divorce." There it was. Not regret, not healing, just resentment. I tapped the screen, activating the overlay. My voice was calm, every syllable intentional. "Chloe, you're aware this call is being recorded, right? I'll be forwarding it to my legal team. It will support my petition for a no-contact order." Everything stopped. Then I heard it. The collapse. Her composure crumbled. She started to cry, real tears now. Not rage, not entitlement. Grief. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "Don't you remember that night I had a fever? You sat by my bed all night. You didn't even sleep. Doesn't any of that mean something to you? I breathed in, slowly. Then I said softly, I remember. I remembered how I didn't drink water that night, afraid I'd miss a single moment if she stirred. I remembered when she was 6 and said she'd buy me a house someday, when she was 10 and promised to take me to Bali. I remembered how I used to dream about the future she painted in crayon and hope. But I also remembered the day she told me not to come to parent-teacher conferences because I was just a housewife. I remembered when she told me I was useless, that I didn't deserve respect. So I said, with the gentleness of finality, I can forgive immaturity, Chloe, but I will not be emotionally extorted. Then, I ended the call, blocked her, everywhere. I didn't even save the voicemail this time. Later that evening, I opened my fridge. Inside was a jar of pickled cucumbers I'd made the day before. Her favorite. I'd made them just in case she came to my door, full of remorse. I held the jar for a moment. Then, I walked it to the trash can, dropped it in. I wasn't saving anything anymore, not even hope. A few days later, Tessa called again. Lena, she said, voice brisk. He made his move, Daniel? He's trying to claim a portion of the trust, arguing that because the money was transferred while you were still legally married, he has rights to it. Of course he was. I didn't feel panic, just exasperation. His claim stated, while the funds originated from the petitioner's mother-in-law, the transfer occurred during legal marriage. As such, both parties had theoretical access and shared entitlement. And the kicker, I have no objection to these funds being used to support the family and our daughter's future needs. Oh, so noble, so transparent. This wasn't about supporting anyone, it was about grabbing what he thought he was owed. One last attempt to hold my freedom by the purse strings. But the evidence was on my side. The wire transfer date, 2 weeks after I'd moved out. The account, mine alone, and that text from my mother, don't give him a single cent. This wasn't a financial dispute. This was the final moment in a long war of ownership. Daniel, trying to claim the last corner of my life, he didn't build but still thought belonged to him. But this time, I had the map, the compass, and the torch. And I wasn't giving him an inch. The courtroom was cooler than the last time. Not in temperature, just in energy. Daniel no longer carried that confident posture, that artificial calm. He wasn't holding back smiles or playing gracious husband. This time, he sat hunched beside his attorney, who leafed through papers like they might reveal a miracle if shuffled fast enough. He wore the same gray suit again. It hung looser now, like it no longer belonged to him either. I didn't bother looking at him. Tessa stood beside me, her file crisp and tight, her expression all business. My client, she began, received these funds as a post-separation personal gift. The account into which they were deposited was established in her name alone, with no shared access. The petitioner had no knowledge of the transaction at the time. She paused, then added, additionally, we've submitted a message from the donor specifying the funds were exclusively for Lena Mitchell's use. She tapped a folder lightly, letting it land with a whisper of confidence. The judge flipped through the document slowly. She asked a few pointed questions about the separation date, the creation of the account, the timing of my move. Then she looked up and delivered the verdict with the same tone you'd use to confirm tomorrow's forecast. These funds are clearly a post-separation personal gift. Miss Mitchell has no legal entitlement to them. No fanfare, no thunder, just justice, quiet and clear. Daniel's attorney sat back with a sigh, rubbing his eyes. Tessa leaned toward me, her voice low. You hear that? She said it with grace, but what she meant was Daniel. Keep your hands off her life. Outside the courthouse, I stood at the top of the steps for a long time. The city buzzed below me, but it felt distant, like I'd risen above it at least for a while. Tessa handed me a warm paper cup. The lid hissed softly as I lifted it. You want to know what he's really afraid of? She asked. I tilted my head. Do I? She smiled. He's not afraid of losing the money. He's afraid you don't need him anymore. That you never did. I nodded. He's afraid I left and I'm thriving. I didn't go home right away. I didn't check emails or messages or even call my mother. Instead, I walked a few blocks and stepped into the town library. Evergreen, my little pocket of joy. The familiar scent of paper and warmth enveloped me the moment I walked through the door. I sat behind the volunteer desk by the window, the afternoon light falling across the table. An older woman approached, clutching a stack of papers in her hand. "I'm trying to apply for Medicare," she said, her voice apologetic, "but I keep getting confused." "Let's figure it out together," I said. We did, step by step. She smiled as she left. "You have such a patient way about you. Most people don't listen the way you do." "I try," I said simply. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're better than some daughters." I didn't flinch. I just smiled. Because this time, I wasn't hearing it with guilt. I was hearing it with clarity. This was who I was. Not someone's maid, not someone's emotional punching bag, not the invisible backbone of a house that never asked how it was doing. This was me, present, whole, helpful but not at the expense of myself. On my walk home, I passed by Maple Avenue again, sat on the same bench. I opened my thermos, sipping slowly. An older woman in a teal coat passed by with a walker. She gave me a look of recognition. "We meet again." "Seems like it," I said. She pointed at the takeout container in my lap. "Dinner alone." "Yup," she nodded, lowering herself onto the bench beside me with a groan. "Me too. 20 years of dinners by myself. And they just kept getting better." I laughed. She turned to me, her voice softened by time but edged with truth. "You know what the secret is." I raised an eyebrow. "It's not about being strong," she said. "It's about finally being done waiting for someone to notice your strength." That evening, I received an email from Daniel. Just one line. "Chloe's falling apart. She says your divorce is ruining her emotionally." I didn't reply. I didn't even open the file attached. Because I knew exactly what it was. The next round of guilt, wrapped in concern. His way of saying, "Look what you've done." But I had learned something important. I was not responsible for other people's refusal to grow. I had raised Chloe with love and intention. I had given Daniel 20 years of my life. What they did with that love, how they used it, twisted it, or buried it, was no longer mine to fix. The next week, Daniel disappeared from social media. Gone were the family photos, the carefully worded captions, the curated image of a successful man with a loving wife and gifted daughter. Just silence, and when the illusion cracked, so did the applause. At church, people stopped greeting him. No more subtle nods in meetings, no more invitations to speak. Respect built on performance doesn't last when the show ends. Then his health began to catch up. The back pain he'd ignored worsened. He no longer had anyone around to push him to take care of himself. Eventually, the board quietly removed him from his executive position, citing personal instability and reputational concerns. All those years of blending personal and business finances, the quick transfers, the blurred lines, no longer passed scrutiny. Without the badge of family man, no one gave him the benefit of the doubt. And when he turned to Chloe, he found she had her own collapse waiting. She'd tried to reinvent herself as a women's empowerment coach, preached independence online, sold programs on finding your voice, but she still hadn't found hers. Her ex got engaged 3 months after they split. She posted a tearful video, not about him, but about me. "How could my mother abandon me?" she cried. "She ran away from everything and left us to clean up the mess." The internet didn't rally behind her. Instead, they responded with comments like, "She didn't abandon you, she chose herself. This woman didn't disappear, she reappeared." Someone had reposted the photo of me under the aurora in Finland, coat billowing, eyes closed. The caption read, "You only get one life. Be good to yourself." Someone liked the comment underneath. It was me. I didn't unblock Chloe. I didn't reply to her new numbers. Sigh. I didn't acknowledge the carefully crafted posts where she painted herself as the daughter left behind by a selfish mother, because I wasn't selfish. For the first time in my life, I was simply choosing me. That's what she couldn't forgive. Not the leaving, but the fact that I didn't beg to return. She tried every tactic. Voice messages that started sweet, then turned sour. Screenshots of unpaid bills. Posts tagged with vague phrases like, "Some mothers forget who raised them." but I stayed quiet. Then, after nearly a month of silence, she cracked again. She sent one last voice message, this one drenched in tears, thick and frantic. "Mom, please! I can't do this alone. I haven't been sleeping. Everything's falling apart. I need you. I miss you." I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, I sat on the edge of my bed, the message playing in the dark, and let it wash over me. Her voice, broken and raw, brought back the memory of a very different Chloe. Small, warm, snuggled in my lap, watching cartoons, whispering, "You're the best mommy in the whole world." And maybe for a moment I wished I could go back. Just for a second. But I couldn't. Because I wasn't missing a child. I was remembering a version of her that no longer existed. The one who looked at me like I was made of gold, not obligation, and the one who would never dream of asking for my bank password before asking how I slept. I recorded my own message, but I didn't send it. I just spoke it into the silence. I remember how I gave everything for you, how I gave up my body, my career, my name, so you could carry yours. I remember sitting by your bed for 12 hours straight when you had that fever. I remember driving 4 hours through snow just to bring you the costume you forgot for the school play. I remember the day you told your friends not to call me Mom because it was embarrassing. I paused, took a deep breath, and added, "I remember everything, and I forgive you, but I also forgive myself for walking away." Then I deleted it, because she didn't need that message. I did. Later that week, I received a letter from Tessa, confirming the finalized divorce decree and closure of all remaining joint accounts. The last line read, "All financial and legal ties are now severed. You are officially free." I stared at the envelope for a long time. I'd spent most of my life trying to be part of something. Daniel's marriage, Chloe's future, everyone's comfort zone. But now, I belonged only to myself. I walked to the kitchen, pulled open the fridge, and stared inside. Empty shelves, save for a few leftovers and a bottle of wine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel obligated to fill it for anyone. I grabbed the wine and poured a glass. Then I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a soft shawl, watching the city flicker to life one window at a time. And I whispered to the night, "You did," not because anyone else needed to hear it, but because I did. I turned that moment into a story, a final chapter for the podcast. I called it, "The Peace That Comes After." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even long. It was a quiet reflection about what it means to live without apology, to walk away, not from people, but from patterns, and to stop saving space in your life for people who never make room for you in theirs. The episode went live on a Sunday morning. Within hours, messages poured in. My mother listened and cried. She finally saw herself in someone else's story. "I'm leaving this week. Your words gave me the push I needed. You're not a villain. You're a blueprint." I saved every comment, not because I needed praise, but because I needed proof that I wasn't alone. That spring, I joined a memoir writing group at the senior center. I read passages aloud every Tuesday evening in a small circle of women with shaking hands and strong hearts. One night, a woman stood and said, "We were never taught how to let go, only how to endure." We all nodded. I wrote it down. The final scene came quietly. I was walking down the street after a library shift when I saw Chloe across the avenue. She didn't see me. She was walking fast, phone clutched in one hand, her expression tense. She looked older, heavier, not in body but in spirit. She looked like someone carrying years of unspoken words. I didn't wave. I didn't cross the street. I just watched her walk by, and I whispered without resentment, "I hope you learn." Later that night, I received a message. Not from Chloe, from a woman I'd met once at the hiking group. She was new, nervous, unsure of her place in the world now that her kids were grown and her husband had remarried. She wrote, "You make me think it's not too late for anything." And I replied, "It's never too late, not even close." Spring arrived in gentle colors, soft pinks blooming along the sidewalks, the trees on Maple Avenue waking slowly, shyly. I walked past them one morning, with a quiet joy blooming inside me that matched the season. My world had gotten smaller, but it had also gotten quieter, and in that quiet, I had room to hear myself again. No door slamming, no footsteps pacing, no voices rising behind closed bedroom doors. Just the rhythm of my own breathing, steady and patient. Just the clink of my own coffee cup on a kitchen counter I no longer resented. One afternoon, I met my mother in the garden behind her house. She was watering the jasmine near the fence, her fingers moving carefully, tenderly, like she was still coaxing life out of tired things. "You know," she said without looking at me, "for a long time I thought I failed you." I blinked. "Why?" "Because I let you go into a home I already knew would break you." I saw it in his eyes the first time he spoke about himself for 10 minutes without asking you a single question. I crouched down next to her, tugging at a few weeds near the stepping stones. "You didn't fail me. You waited. You gave me the space to learn. You gave me the map back home." She nodded. Then, with a small smile, she added, "And you drew a new map, one for yourself." I thought about that for a long time after I left. About all the women I'd met since I walked away. The ones who whispered, "You're braver than me." The ones who said, "I've been waiting for someone to go first." I realized something then. My story wasn't rare. What was rare was that I told it out loud. That same week, the library offered me a part-time staff role. It didn't pay much, but it felt like gold in my hands. I signed the contract with my full name, Lena Mitchell. No misses, no attachments, no borrowed titles, just me. One Saturday, as I restocked the recommended reads shelf, a teenage girl walked up, clutching a paperback. She looked nervous, her hair half tucked behind her ears. "Excuse me," she said, "do you have anything for someone who's not really sure where they belong anymore?" I smiled gently. "Yeah," I said. "I think I know just the I led her down the aisle to the section labeled Transitions. She ran her fingers along the spines. "Did you ever feel that way?" she asked. "All the time," I said, "but I learned that sometimes not belonging is the first step toward becoming." She looked at me like I'd just handed her a secret. Maybe I had. The final message from Chloe came in late summer. Not a voicemail, not a request, just a photo. She was sitting on a bench beside a river, alone, no caption, no filter, just her, staring out at the water, arms around her knees. I didn't reply, but I didn't block her either. I let the photo stay in my inbox. A quiet offering. Maybe the start of something better, maybe not. But for once, I didn't need to know. I didn't need to control the story anymore. That fall, I stood at the edge of the forest trail, hiking boots dusty, leaves crunching underfoot. Beside me was a woman from the memoir group. She had once whispered to me after a reading, "You wrote the life I was too afraid to live." Now she was here, hiking with me, shoulders back, voice louder than the whisper I'd first met. "You think it ever really ends?" she asked. "Healing," I said. "Yeah, the unraveling. The pulling yourself back together." I thought about it for a while as we walked, the trees folding in around us. "I don't think it ends," I said finally. "But I think at some point, it stops hurting to begin again." She smiled. And we kept walking. That winter, I sat in my mother's kitchen while she prepared a cup of red tea. The jasmine we'd planted in spring was blooming out of season. As she stirred honey into the pot, she said, "I used to be afraid you'd get lost. But now I think you were just waiting to bloom." I watched her, my eyes stinging a little. "Mom," I said quietly, "do you think Chloe will ever change?" She didn't look up. She just said, "Do you think you would have listened if someone had tried to make you leave before you were ready?" I shook my head. "No." She handed me the cup. "Then let her find her own timing. Let her grow. Or don't. But either way, don't wait anymore." And I didn't. I booked a solo trip to the coast in early January. I hiked cliffs and listened to ocean wind. I visited art galleries and scribbled stories in the margins of travel brochures. I watched women walk alone on boardwalks, holding their own keys, their own luggage, their own lives. I didn't envy them. I was one of them. This story is a powerful reminder that love without respect is not love. It's servitude. Lena's journey shows us the quiet courage it takes to reclaim your voice, walk away from emotional neglect, and choose yourself after years of being unseen. If this resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe for more empowering stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps these stories alive. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your region or country in the comments so we can see how far this message traveled.